Hey fam, I want you to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications. For today, Democrats introduced HR4, which is focused on restoring the Voting Rights Act, which was gutted in the 2013 Shelby County versus Holder Supreme Court decision, which really what it got rid of was the pre-clearance and oversight of the Department of Justice. And the moment that happened in 2013, Republicans across the country immediately rushed to enact voter ID laws and other forms of laws to deal with the issue of voting. Some of them were later struck down. Others did move forward. When you think about the 2016 election, Reverend Dr. William J. Barber often says that voter suppression was one of the issues that largely ignored that had an impact on Donald Trump actually winning by 77,000 votes in 3 states. But Wisconsin alone, many believe that voter ID there impacted some 200,000 people, not just African Americans, but elderly, white voters as young voters as well. And so today, the Democrats met on Capitol Hill to announce the introduction of HR4. Here is Alabama Congresswoman Terri Sewell, there from the Black Belt of Alabama, which of course, when you think about Selma, you think about Birmingham, that's where all of this originated.
So to close out, I want to again thank those who are the steady drumbeat for voting rights in America, our amazing voting rights advocates. These groups have really been the drumbeat for so many of us. I know that we all want to take a picture with John Lewis, so I'm going to close this out by just simply saying, Shelby decision really issued a challenge to Congress, the Supreme Court did, for us to come up with a Section 4 that was modern day, a modern day formula. And our efforts are now to show that without Shelby, it's been pretty easy to see what state legislatures have been doing across this country without the protection, the full protections of the Voting Rights Act. They have been suppressing the right to vote. In the name of fraud, voter fraud, in the name of not having enough resources, they're closing down polling locations. In the name of ostensibly making it fundamentally easier to vote, they are indeed making it harder to vote. So we stand together today, and we introduce, along with 200 plus members of the House today, the Voting Rights Advancement Act. I am very proud and want to acknowledge my great staff who came up with these great buttons and all the wonderful work that we're all doing, but this is just a drumbeat. This legislation, in order to become law, must pass the Senate, the House, the Senate, and be signed by a president. And currently, we have an environment that's hostile to doing what we can do to make it easier for people to vote. We have to acknowledge that too many states have gone unchecked. That's why we have court decisions like that in North Carolina that said that they had crafted a law, a state law, with precision, surgical precision, that was done to exclude African Americans. And in the state of Texas, they're still battling. So I think it's so important that we all acknowledge that there is a problem and that we're here to fix it. We believe that the Voting Rights Advancement Act is that fresh start. It's a 25-year look back, not to the days of 1960, not to the days of the 40s, but 1994 going forward. And we're going to look to see those states that have been egregious actors. I want to thank all of those who have participated in today's presser. And onward and upward. We're on our way to Selma this weekend, and we look forward to continuing to press for the voices of the excluded. Because after all, that's what Restore the Vote stands for. We're restoring the vote, the voices of the excluded. Thank you all.
And of course, you heard there Congresswoman Terri Sewell mention going to Selma this weekend is the anniversary of Bloody Sunday there in Selma. I'll be there this weekend as well, hosting and moderating several events. One of the folks who was there in 1965, of course, was Congressman John Lewis at the time. He was a young man, leader with Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. He also spoke at today's news conference. Here we go to my iPad. Here's what Congressman John Lewis had to say.
Code shouldn't matter. The action of government affects every American, so every citizen should have an equal voice. And when that happens, politicians have to recognize the dignity and the worth of every human being. We all count. It doesn't matter whether you're black or white, Latino, Asian American, or Native American. We're one people, we're one family. We all live in the same house, the American house. And there are forces in America today trying to take us back to another time and to another period. We've come too far and made too much progress to go back.
Let's bring in our panelist, Chris Metzler. He joins us via Skype, of course, a conservative strategist and author of Divided We Stand, The Search for America's Soul. We have in studio Monique Presley, legal analyst and crisis manager. And next to her, of course, is Malik Abdul, Republican political consultant. And joining us, first time, Dr. Niambi Carter, assistant professor in the Howard University Department of Political Science. We'll be sure try not to haze you here on the show. So let's start here. In fact, I'm going to start with two black Republicans first, Chris, and I'm going to start with Malik. So, Chris, to me, this is if we go back after the Shelby Holder decision, you had Congressman Sensenbrenner of Wisconsin who introduced a bill to restore the VRA. Republicans pretty much ignored it. Only about a dozen or so signed on as co-sponsors. In the next session, the number was even lower. But the reality is it's been Republicans who have after this decision, who rush to pass lots of what have been described as onerous voter suppression laws. Why won't the GOP stand with Democrats when it comes to this to protect the sanctity and the right to vote?
Well, so let me give you the argument, and then I'll give you my analysis of that argument. The argument essentially is that the issue of voting is something that should be decided by the state. Now, that's the argument. Does that argument hold water? I don't think so. I think that, in fact, we really have to look at having Republicans endorse this move to reenact the Voting Rights Act.
And look, I keep making the point, Malik, Republicans they rush to pass these laws, and as long as Republicans keep standing in the way of folks voting, black folks are not even going to remotely consider voting for them.
Well, that's one of the reasons. I've been on record saying that, of course, I support efforts to restore any rights. I don't support voter suppression. I think one of the things that we can take from this, if we listen to Representative Sewell, she said something that was really true when she mentioned that I think it was the court said that Congress needs to come up with something, that Congress needs to act.
And so in 6 years they haven't.
Well, no, I'm not.
Republicans made no effort to deal with it.
I'm not arguing that Congress hasn't acted. I'm actually referring to what Congresswoman Sewell is talking about when she says that Congress has to act. Now, what that looks like at the end, I don't know. I haven't looked at all the details of the proposal that the Democrats are putting forward, but I support any efforts to, whether it's restore voting rights or, make any sort of adjustments to people being able to vote or, any side of suppression efforts. I don't agree with it. I do wish that the Republican Party, unfortunately, this is one of those issues that has become purely political when it should not be. When we're talking about rights, when we're talking about whether it's the voting rights or LGBT rights or any of those things, when we're talking about that, it shouldn't be political. But unfortunately, we live in a time where those things. So if you're the left, you're supposed to think this. If you're on the right, you're supposed to think that.
Dr. Carter, bottom line is this here: Republicans are not going to support this, and you already have Senator Mitch McConnell, who is standing on the floor of the United States Senate, opining about election fraud and saying, oh, the reason this thing happened in North Carolina is because Democrats wouldn't back voter ID. I'm going to play this video later. But he wouldn't say jack that it was actually a Republican, Mark Harris, who actually was the one involved in election fraud. And he ignored the advice of his own son, a U.S. attorney, saying, don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had Mitch McConnell a month ago call HR1, which was an attempt to address some of these issues about modernizing how we do registration, et cetera, as a power grab, right? The idea that turning Election Day into a national holiday, a paid holiday, so that it would make people's access to the ballot easier, he called that a power grab for Democrats. So I think Mitch McConnell has made it very clear, Senate Majority Leader, he has no interest in helping people secure the right to vote. And I believe, and I don't think there's any dispute here, at least, that having the access to the vote and being able to express that freely and with as little interference as possible is an ideal that shouldn't be partisan, right? But people are here playing politics, and you said something very critical, which is North Carolina was an example of election fraud, not voter fraud, which has been kind of this clarion call for Republicans to enact all these draconian measures. But really, voter fraud is a very, very small thing that doesn't happen. Election fraud, as we see, is very robust and is here. And this is the first time we've had a federal election have to be redone because of the actions of a person who wanted to win. Well,
Monique, no doubt this is going to pass the House. And I doubt very seriously Mitch McConnell is even going to allow this to even be up for a vote in the Senate, because let's just be clear, Republicans, if you look at the strategy of the party is actually to have fewer folks. You look at the people who were on Trump's so-called voter fraud commission, individuals who have long said point blank that, yes, if fewer people vote, it's better for us.
Right. So the first thing is, whenever anybody asks me why I would never, ever, ever be a Republican, I always come back to issues like this, because it's not that I can't be fiscally conservative in my thinking. I think that I can. I think the older that we get, we are. Just, you know, you make some money, you think twice about how you want to spend it. It's not as easy to want to give it away in your taxes. So it's a commitment to be a Democrat. But when you look at issues like this, where people kept saying the Supreme Court gutted the VRA, no. That is not what happened. The Supreme Court took a particular portion and said it's outdated. Prove to us why Arizona should still have to ask for approval from Congress before they change their voting rights. Prove to us why Texas should have to do it. Prove to us why Alabama should have to do it, and so on for all of the 13 states. That could have been fixed within 6 months. Elections matter.
But they also didn't want to fix it. And in fact,
that's what I'm saying.
Because
Elections matter.
The moment this decision was made, Republican legislatures across the country, Chris, rushed to implement voter ID laws, rushed to implement a range of other laws. You had Republicans in Maine who actually, the voters in Maine established same-day registration. The Republican legislature in Chris got rid of it, and then the voters came back in the next election, put it back on the ballot, and passed it 65%, saying, who the hell told y'all to touch same-day registration?
Yeah, well, you know, that's a major part of the issue. And look, I don't think that the party is sufficiently educated on this issue. It's one of the things that those of us who work within the party are trying to get the party to understand at a very fundamental level. And it continues to be a struggle. That's the reality.
But there were also some good things that came out of some states being able to make changes, like online registration. So it wasn't that every change that was made was bad. It was that because there was a Republican-led Congress at the time, the short things that needed to be done to show Alabama still had a problem, and North Carolina still had a problem, and South Carolina still had a problem, those did not happen. And so what we need to see now is a fight for it. And we've got to explain this to our people, because I don't think it's just Republicans who don't understand what's really at stake, or maybe even understand the part that I just explained, you know, that this is a small part of a bigger piece of legislation, and it isn't gutted. We can put teeth back into it. It just will take the action of the legislature right now.
Go ahead. Final
I was just going to say, I disagree that Republicans don't understand. Actually, Republicans, particularly...
Oh, they get it.
They understood very well, and they implemented their plan to perfection, which was to suppress Black and Latino and poor and other voters that they did not want to see exerting their voice. But
not just them, but also, I keep saying this here, and I said this on a panel at CBC a couple of years ago to all the civil rights groups. Y'all have got to challenge young white folks, because what it also protected were any moves made in those states when it came to voting. There was a clerk in Wisconsin who was on record as saying she purposely moved an early voting location off of a college campus because too many young people had voted Democrat in the previous election. And what was happening is Republicans all across the country, what they were doing was they were actually taking voting locations and sending them out to far places that had small parking lots. So when you drove up, you were like, damn, it's a long line. You got frustrated. You saw in North Carolina, the most, to me, Alabama of the 21st century, where they literally said, I mean, look, and they have documentation, when do black people vote early? 70+% voted during the first week. So they stripped early voting in many places the first week to only one location in many counties. I was in Ohio in 2016, in Cuyahoga County, where Cleveland is. There was one early voting location before the election. You had to go downtown. I mean, so their whole deal was, we're going to make it as hard for people as possible to vote. And then we saw the response there. And so, again, I can't wait to see what the reaction is going to be when this bill gets passed. And I can't wait to hear what Republicans in the House are going to say, Malik, and then what excuses they're going to offer. But again, this is one where it's a no-brainer. Republicans should be saying, no, let's make it easier for people to vote versus make it harder. And I don't think for a second that they're going to support this, and Mitch McConnell is going to fight it all the way in the Senate. And hopefully there are some senators with some courage who are going to say, you know what, this makes sense. We should go with it. And then, of course, if Trump vetoes it, get the votes to override his veto.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that I don't disagree, but I think it still goes back to what I said as far as where we are in the climate. You know, there are a lot of things that both parties should support. Just in principle, there are a lot of things that the party should support, but I think we're at a time where everything is so politically toxic that you will find people where it's good legislation.
Well, voting ain't politically toxic.
Well, but this is, unfortunately, this is where we are. You know,
these are only politically toxic because, look,
but it's one of many things.
Well, yeah, but they want to win.
One of a number of things.
They want to win, and then when they saw what happened in 2008. They said, oh, hell no, we are not going to have that coalition again, which is why Republicans in North Carolina were so dastardly with what they did. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Unfiltered video in just one moment. All right, folks, calling all HBCU alumni, students, and leaders, enter the Ford Motor Company HBCU Mobility Challenge and win $25,000 for your school. Building on their long-term support of HBCUs, Ford is looking to improve mobility in HBCU communities through innovative solutions. The winning program will receive a grant of up to $25,000 to implement the proposal. Now, the deadline is to apply is March 31st, 2019. Go to FGB.Life for more information to apply. FGB.Life for more information to apply. And if you're watching, tell your HBCU that if they don't know about this, they need to be doing it. You should be pushing this on social media. Again, folks, 25 grand that could go to one of the HBCU campuses. Ford goes further in our community, and we certainly appreciate them being a partner here on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Now back to your Roland Martin Unfiltered video.